tonight, everyone. It's great to see everyone here. And Nathan, thank you for joining us as our first speaker for the series. Yes, we're really excited to have you here. Yeah, so we're all looking forward to hearing more about your experiences and your organization. Yeah, so I think a good starting point here would be, if you can just kind of tell us about yourself and um, kind of give us an overview of your experiences with stuttering and kind of, like your stuttering journey. So if you don't mind, sharing those experiences with us.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me, Katie, Zach, and the rest of the um, Shared Voices group. I know it's a lot of pressure to go first, so I'll try to make the most of it. So yeah, for me, in terms of a little just background. So I'm 21 years old. I just graduated from UCLA on my path toward attending medical school and hopefully becoming a physician. And so for me, stuttering started, as with most people, around second or first grade. My father stuttered, but his stuttering really improved early on in around middle school. And so it wasn't until middle school here. So I grew up in the Bay Area. It wasn't until middle school that I started really to kind of see the impact that stuttering had on my life. Obviously, the basic, it was very hard to make friends. Obviously, um, uh, being made fun of, and this idea that something that came so easily to people speaking, I just couldn't do, right? And so kind of in a funny way, I used to have like a gap in my teeth. And so my parents, for the longest time, thought that the reason I stuttered was because of that gap, right? And that I couldn't enunciate my words. It's not, their fault. They didn't really understand what to do with stuttering. And so our mentality was a hands-off approach all throughout middle school, high school. So once I got to high school, it was still obviously similar. I had a very hard time in classes. Um, I maybe didn't really understand mental health at the time, but that was probably my lowest point in terms of around freshman year of high school. It was just hard to really communicate. Um, and it wasn't until later that I realized a lot of my developmental attributes in terms of speaking and those social skills were like a couple years behind. Right? And so, in high school, it was my brother who really kind of pushed me to really try to put myself out there, right? Even if I couldn't speak, there were other ways that maybe I can gain the confidence to participate. And so, through a lot of ups and downs, I ended up kind of becoming involved in student council. Actually, one thing I found was having a stutter made me more kind of empathetic toward people. I could really connect with people easily because uh, people come from different types of backgrounds, ethnicities, cultures, whatever it is, and having a stutter really breeds that empathy that people are going through these difficult obstacles underneath the surface that you might not be readily aware of. And that actually proved very useful because in my campaigns for student council, people really connected with me early on, even though I didn't know them. And then that's where I started really developing my kind of penchant for public service in high school. It was those connections that really helped. And then by my senior year of high school, ironically, this kid who stuttered pretty severely from middle school until high school, by my senior year, it had improved a little bit because I had gotten more confidence. But ironically, I was the one who was speaking in front of the whole school at rallies, which was kind of funny to me. They gave the mic to a 17-year-old who stutters. But yeah, and then in terms of going to college, freshman year, that's when I find out about the National Stuttering Association from a simple Google search. I was just searching up stuttering, as many kids who stutter do. I was 17, and then I found out about the NSA, got involved, I started a local chapter in West LA, and then I went to the Dallas conference in 2017, and that's when I started really hearing about this community, about speech therapists, about it was just beautiful to see how kids who stuttered really had friends who stuttered. Right, I never had that. I was kind of always the only one who stuttered, and it was a something that I tried to hide, and so that brought me a lot of pleasure and hope that there was this community out there.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all that, Nathan. That's very inspiring to hear. And for me personally, I had a lot of similar experiences to some of the things you just mentioned, and I'm sure that some people on here did as well. So it's you know it's always great to hear from someone else about their experiences and how they became successful. Um, so I think with that, we can kind of segue into that. So giving given some of the experiences you had with stuttering, can you kind of talk us through like how that led you to start the organization, the Southern California Stuttering Service? It
Yeah.
kind of if there was kind of a segue from your experiences to your inspiration uh, for starting the organization.
Yeah. So for me, again, high school, I didn't really understand anything about stuttering, anything about speech therapy. My only experience with speech therapy was the public school speech therapy from obviously general speech therapists. And in my first year of college, when I was 17, I think, maybe 18, um, when I joined the NSA, again, I interacted with all these speech therapists who were telling me about this acceptance-based speech therapy, right? And I was like, what is that? What is this? What is this like acceptance-based therapy? And then I learned about acceptance-based therapy is about building, it's not about improving structural fluency, which was my experience with speech therapy in high school, and that had made my stuttering worse. And from what I understand, that happened to a lot of people who stutter. But it was about the confidence, the social interaction, the psychological aspect to it, which when I heard about it, it made a lot of sense, because for me, I kind of had that naturally, where as I became more confident in myself, um, my kind of quality of life improved a lot, right? So I really connected with the idea of acceptance-based speech therapy. And then what I heard was, from speech therapists, was that this acceptance-based speech therapist from people who know stuttering is usually very expensive, right? Oftentimes, the average number is $200 for an evaluation and 150 per hour, depending on where the therapist is. Obviously, it was a shame. I kept hearing this is the biggest problem, because nobody goes into speech therapy to make money, but these people have to keep a roof on their head, right? And so I kind of like I was thinking about it. So I was like, how do most kids who can't afford that? My parents were in that group where they didn't want to spend that money on something that they thought would go away. And so I was wondering, people from low income communities who can't afford that, how would they get access to that? And I was shocked that, from what I understood, most of the procedures to lowering those costs involved direct involvement on the speech therapist of trying to reduce the cost, right? And so the speech therapist will try to cut as much as they can, but there's this gap between how much the speech therapist can cut and how much like someone who can't afford it can reach. And there was no organization that was really driven to focus in that gap, right? On building that bridge. And so, I looked left, I looked right, and I was like, okay, why don't I do it, right? And that's really all it was. So I started slowly. I really wanted to find the right people. So early on, I was 18. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I got a lot of my early seed funding from UCLA club grants, local corporate sponsorship. partnered with people who know stuttering, speech therapists who know stuttering, and we connected with those clients who really couldn't um, afford speech therapy, and we basically sponsored their speech therapy at a reduced rate. And so, um, so the first year we had about 3 kids at a rate of, so regular speech therapy costs about 10 grand per year. Our rate was at 4 grand, and then the next year we helped 10 kids at 2 grand per year, and then this year we're on track for to reach 20 at 1,500 per year. And so we're able to reduce our costs and increase our output. And yeah, it's been amazing because it's this need that I feel is out there, and I'm trying to do what I can to tackle it.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. I mean, yeah, I mean I think that's such a huge need in the stuttering community, and you know, like you said, I think before this, it was, you know, it was pretty much an underserved area.
Mhm.
There really was no area for this. So I mean, it's, you know, it's great to hear that you know, you're so inspired to start this and help, and
Mhm.
already help, you know, a lot of people already. Um, so before, you know, we kind of get into the specifics of the organization, you kind of mentioned already like the process for starting this. So you mentioned, you know, you had to reach out um, for investments. So yeah, I'm guessing that was you had to reach out to investors or for scholarships. So I
Mhm.
mean, can you kind of, you know, talk us through the process of, you know, the initial idea was in your head until, you know, actually seeing your organization form and starting to see it grow? Like, you can kind of talk us through, um, you know, some of the parties you had to reach out to, and some of
Mhm.
the challenges you had along the way, you know, setting up your organization.
Yeah. So it's a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization. And so the first thing I had to do was how to create a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And that's where Google was my best friend. Obviously there's a little bit of like nuance with like the legal paperwork. So after I did that, I was like, okay, nobody is going to hop on board unless I have a little bit, at least a little bit of seed funding, right? And the thing that most people don't realize is that a lot of these institutions, these educational institutions, community colleges, universities, they have thousands, hundreds of thousands, or if not millions of dollars dedicated to social impact, right? But the barrier to access those funds is these kind of owners' applications, right? And so I kind of spent a lot of time applying to. The first money was about 5 grand from UCLA's like Club Fund, right? And then after I got that, I reached out to another branch at UCLA to get a grant. So I received this grant. It's a public service grant for like young uh, people who are trying to start projects. So filled out the application, and then I was selected, and that gave 15 grand, right? And then after I had that money, we had a little bit of traction, and so I had to really like leverage people I know. I had the privilege of growing up in the Bay Area, and there's a lot of technology companies around here. So I really tried to leverage, family, friends, like family, about getting me in touch with the right people who would also sponsor our organization. And so a few startup companies have um, philanthropy initiatives, and they donated 10 grand, 15 grand, whatever it was. And so it was a lot of those, like, kind of trying to be creative, right? It's not a charted path. For every a one yes, I had 10 or 20 no's, right? And so I had to really be creative. And in terms of challenges with that, again, it can be daunting because I was 18, I was taking classes, and I was doing other stuff, trying to go to medical school to keep going, right? And um, I really had to look to advisors and get the right people on board who could help me with that. And, and so I was really focused on bringing on the right people. And so We've now established a group of, board of directors of people, the best speech therapists who know stuttering across the country, to really help me overcome those obstacles.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like you were just being, just really proactive and starting, kind of like grassroots, from growing this organization. So
Mhm.
I'm kind of curious, so like, you mentioned during that, for every one person that would say yes,
Mhm.
there would be 20 people that said no. And you had to be so proactive, in reaching out to all these different organizations. So I'm curious if, kind of, your experiences with stuttering, like as you mentioned, before, made you more empathetic and kind of, maybe taught you to overcome obstacles. So I'm wondering if, those experiences you had with stuttering kind of helped you with this process for starting your organization. I mean, obviously, the organization is related to stuttering, but just
Yeah.
those qualities, about persevering and 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 like obstacles and overcoming obstacles.
Yeah.
So just those positive qualities of stuttering, kind
Yeah.
of, if they really helped you in this part of the process.
Yeah. There was a New York Times article the other day, I think a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, stuttering is everywhere in the news now because of um, Vice President Biden. But there was an article about him because it was just before the debate, and they're talking about his stuttering, right? About how it's the source of his power. And what I mean by that is when you grow up stuttering, you learn how to deal with bullies, right? So I learned very early on those day-to-day interactions where people were making fun of my stutter, whatever it was. When you get that every day for years and years, right? Every day, every month, every minute, whatever it is, for years, you kind of learn how to deal with difficult situations, right? So in handling a bully, I actually have a very similar response mechanism than to someone like Biden, where I don't know if you notice, whenever Trump was trying to bully him, he would like smile, right? He just laugh it off. So that's what I did too. And so that taught me how to deal with adversity and kind of like, okay, that happened, and now what can I do moving on, right? And so growing up, it was like, okay, that was a difficult situation. Uh, what can I do to avoid those situations in the future? I'm going to avoid that person, right? And with my organization, it was okay, that didn't work. Who do I need to reach out to in order to raise this money? I mean, the impact stuttering can have on dealing with adversity, I feel like can't be understated. It's, I think, the number one reason why I was able to deal with adversity throughout college with this organization. And then even beyond that, like when you can't speak, you're kind of, at least in my experience, I was I was quiet for so long, right? I was a shy kid. I was limited for so long, right? And that kind of it's like a pressure cooker. It was intense and intense, and then once I reached high school and college, it kind of blew up. And now I want to do everything, right? Because when you're quieted for so long, like now that my confidence has improved, I don't want to take any moment for granted, right? And I again attribute that to stuttering. Um, it's my pressure cooker.
No, yeah, that's great. That's great. And I'm so glad that you shared that with all of us, because I mean, that's something that took me such a long time to realize too, that, you know, the positive, sort of the positive attributes of stuttering. And, I'm so glad I'm so glad, I was able to realize that. And it's great that you did too, and you're able to share that, with us all today. So it's great to hear. Um, yeah. So now I kind of want to get into, sort of the specifics of the organization. So,
Mhm.
kind of, some of the, specific projects that you guys have had, so far, and, some of the things you're planning, and, if you could just talk about, what's sort of ongoing, with your organization, and, if there's any plans for the future.
Yeah. So right now there's a few um, different projects going on. So the first project is the speech therapy project, as I talked about, to help people gain confidence with stuttering. The acceptance-based speech therapy, where we connect people from low-income communities, and we sponsor their uh, therapy from uh, the best speech therapists who know stuttering. Number two, we also form local support groups just between our clients, just to help them, again, to form those like meaningful, lifelong um, connections that can just really help uh, people's mental health and well-being. And then number three, our third initiative is something that I feel quite passionate about. And so, as someone who went through the special education system, um, stuttering is kind of falls under the public school speech therapist domain, right? But under the current law and policy, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act ends after high school. And so after high school, a lot of people who stutter lose that support. And so what happens in college or the workforce, wherever you go, you can still get support, but you have to go out there and find it. And for people with disabilities, any disability, whether it's a stutter or anything else, that can be hard because you need help. I know I did, speaking for from personal experience. And so what we do is we go to local schools across the country. So we currently have chapters in 20 states across the country. And we go into local schools trying to, it's very simple, just host workshops educating students on the resources available to them. And most of the presenters are people who stutter. And so we speak from personal experience, and we're trying to help these kids with disabilities to be aware that there are resources out there available to them. So those are the three facets of the growing organization.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's yeah, those are all, great areas, and they're obviously, very important. So how many participants are currently part of the organization now?
Yeah. Do you mean volunteers, or do you mean the?
I guess both. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess, volunteers or students participating in the services.
Yeah. So volunteers, where almost everyone is either a student or a young adult with an interest in speech therapy, so future speech therapists or people who stutter. Volunteers, were at about 25 now, part-time. And then in terms of people impacted, we've provided our sponsored services, as I mentioned earlier, have helped uh, 20 families. And our workshops have reached around 3,000 kids with disabilities across the country. And the families are across the country as well. So those are some of the numbers.
Wow, that's great. And this organization started last year, correct? So I mean, just over a
So
year, you guys have grown that much
so
already.
yeah, so it technically started a few years ago, end of 2017, but we didn't start the workshops and we didn't really gain traction until about 2 years ago, and then it just, like you said, it kind of blew up. I was spending that first year, handling the challenges I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's just, I mean, so it's a really fast growing organization, and it's, it sounds like it's been able to help a lot of families
Mhm.
already. So that's really good to hear. So can you kind of tell us then how people can get involved then with the organization? If someone wants to get involved, can you kind of take us through the steps that they should go through?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for anyone who wants to be involved, we welcome that. There are kind of four main areas to be involved, and if you're interested, go to our website, stutteringservice.org. So stutteringservice.org, and send us a message. And so they can be involved on the speech therapy services side, which is really handling communication with speech therapists and families, bringing on new speech therapists, handling finances. They can be involved in our workshops, right? Going to local schools, hosting a chapter, and talking to people who stutter in those local areas. They can be involved with our support groups, helping to lead local support groups, or they can be involved with fundraising and advocacy if they feel that they're interested in getting the word out through social media or other venues. So yeah, go ahead and send us a message on stutteringservice.org.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think Katie just posted a link in the chat. So if anyone's interested, feel free, to follow that link there. Yeah, I mean, this sounds like a great organization, Nathan. So, it's great. It's great to be able to start this, at such a young age, and you've already had, such a big impact on so many families. So, so thank you for starting that. And, I'm sure everyone involved is also very grateful and has found it, to be very beneficial for their stuttering journey. So thanks for everything that you've done with that. So the last question here I want to ask before we open it up to the audience was, if you have any advice for someone either looking to join the stuttering community, so someone looking just to join events like this, just get involved in general, or also someone who is looking to lead a project or an organization, like you started. So if you have any advice for anyone in those positions.
Yeah, first of all, I would say thank you. Right? I think the stuttering community is this huge community of people with limitless potential, and any organization, no matter how small, makes a difference on people's lives. And I guess the major piece of advice I would give is that I know it seems daunting to start an organization, to be involved. I was a person who stutters, and being proactive, at least for me, wasn't something that was natural because I was so covert with my stuttering. So the major piece of advice I'll give is really the Nike slogan, just do it. Right? Like, we people who stutter have so much potential, and there's resources out there, right? There's so many amazing organizations like Shared Voices, National Stuttering Association, like Friends, obviously SDSS. These amazing organizations are out there, and so don't be afraid to ask for help, right? I didn't know what I was doing until I brought on people who knew stuttering, people who were more experienced than I was. And so if you can do that, I think it'll end up being great, and we can create a lot of change for people who stutter. I mean, we are an extremely overlooked community. I'm glad that the past couple months there has been a lot more awareness. But I mean, people who stutter have so much potential. It's that they can really change the world, in my opinion.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I agree with that. So for sure. Yeah. So thanks again for joining us, Nathan. That was all the questions that I had prepared. So now we can open it up to the audience for either questions for Nathan or just to have a sort of like a general discussion. So feel free if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you would prefer just to type it into the chat button. Either one works, but yeah, at this point, yeah, we'll open it up to everyone.
Hi, I'm Jeanette. You want to tell you who you are?
Hi, Xavier.
And my question is for Nathan. I'm blown away.
I love you, pumpkin. Your pumpkin. I love you, pumpkin.
Sorry, was I muted? So I'm Jeanette. This is
Xavier.
And I'm so impressed by you, Nathan. I cannot. It blows my mind that you're 21 years old. But My question, or I guess my comment is, what would you tell your 9-year-old self, like Xavier, who's a person who stutters? Any advice for him as he goes through his life? I've already heard so many great things that you've already said, but I think he would love to hear it directly.
I
Yeah.
love you, pumpkin.
Thanks.
Pumpkin.
Yeah. Nice to meet you, Jeanette and Xavier. Obvious, any kid who stutters, I see myself, in you. And what I would say is, I know it's hard, right? I know it's difficult. When I was 9, I wouldn't even have the courage to say my name in a group like this. And so kudos to you. You're already a lot further on than I was. But one thing I would say is, I know kids can be tough at that age, but being a person who stutters has given me so much in terms of my empathy, my character, and people who make fun of you. That's a very finite thing. Like, that'll go away. But the things that stuttering will give you, qualities, perseverance, that's infinite. Like, that'll last forever. And I truly believe that people who stutter have this immense potential. And I know you'll do great things because you're going through those difficult times. So I would say keep going. There's a huge stuttering community that I didn't have. So please continue to stay involved. You obviously have a loving mom who's helping you out. And so I would say keep going, man. You can do so much. I just can't emphasize that enough, because it was, when you're 9, what people say can really hurt, right? But once you get through it and you understand that the people who are there for you are the ones who love you, I mean, you'll do great things. So yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I love you, pumpkin.
Hi, Nathan. This is Ruben.
Ruben.
Really encouraged with everything that you're doing here, and I think it's a great initiative, and I give you so much credit for the courage to start something up. I was curious if you could talk a bit more about what you see the vision being for 2021 and maybe even past that. What would be like your ideal dream?
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about dream, so there were kind of 2 questions there, right? So dream or 2021. So I can answer both, but
I think they're both important, and I agree that they're probably different questions.
Yeah. So yeah, in terms of starting out with 2021, we're on a fundraising campaign. Now that we have legitimacy, obviously, when you start out with just an 18-year-old who stutters, it's hard to raise money and do all that. But now that we have this record, we're trying to raise $30K in our next cycle. I'm kind of bringing on more people who really stuttering, have that expertise, have that knowledge, hoping to expand our therapy to 50 clients. And so I want to keep doubling. And so we've been pretty much doubling every year. So I want to keep, that'll be 2.5x this next year. And then in terms of our workshops, obviously, through the NSA and other organizations, I know a lot of people who stutter in a lot of different states. And so I really want to make these workshops like something that happens in every state across the country, because I believe strongly in the mission of providing these overlooked students with access to these resources. And so that's the short-term 1-year goal. The dream is there's almost like 5 million children who stutter, right? Like some of them can afford speech therapy, some can't. But even for those who can afford it, I mean, it just because they afford it doesn't mean that it's not hard on their family. And so the dream is to really provide as many people or children who stutter, young adults who stutter, with access to effective acceptance-based therapy, because that, I believe strongly in what acceptance-based speech therapy does, because you know, nothing against the speech therapist therapy I got in high school, but I know the effect that stuttering specialized speech therapy can have. And so providing kids who stutter, like, you know, Xavier right there, it just kind of unleashes their potential, right? And then in terms of the workshops, expanding to different countries. We're actually starting a chapter that is relatively new in India, and it's my dream that we get multiple countries on this stuff, because, so I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but I'll talk a little bit about cultural stigma with stuttering as well. So I'm of Indian American descent. My parents are immigrants from India. I grew up here in the US, and stuttering in my culture is not a disability. It's not something to get help with. It's something to hide and get over, right? And so it's a completely different stigma. And so helping people who come from different cultural backgrounds to accept their stutter as well is a dream of mine, because I don't think one's cultural background should be the reason that people turn their back on people who stutter. Mhm.
I guess
That-
I have a question for you, Nathan.
Mhm.
When you first started, when you were 18 or 19, and I love what you said, you know, it's the total entrepreneur thing, right? Of like, for every yes, I get 20 no's.
Mhm.
How, I know you were part of the NSA at that time, but, you know, how did you find those initial partners? Was it, or, you know, just people who were willing to say yes? Was it just total luck and you were blindly emailing people, or was it you were being very strategic and targeted? You know, and as I'm asking this question, I'm being, you know, other people who might be watching this will post this recording later, who have an idea that they want to get off the ground. And I think your story is a great one, that it takes more than just one person, right? So how did you find those early folks to help get you on your way?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of cold emailing and leveraging the people I knew. So I'll start with kind of cold emailing before. So I technically started it before I joined the NSA. So I would just start with cold emailing, and that's when I came into contact with speech therapists who were telling me a bit about acceptance-based speech therapy. You know, I didn't really know anything, right? And then once I got to the NSA, I started to, you know, you start to see and understand who the leaders in the stuttering community are in terms of speech therapists who really understand stuttering. And so in terms of strategy, I was like, during the conferences, you know, if we're talking like micro level strategy, during the conferences, I was like, I want to talk to that person, right? I want to pick their brain, right? You know, I just want to see. So the conferences in 2017, when I was 18, I spent most of the time interacting with other people who stutter, because I'd never done that. And two, trying to learn about this kind of speech therapy for people who stutter. What is this? And so after you kind of build that knowledge, build that credibility, I reached out to people like that, you know, about getting on board. And obviously you face obstacles with, you know, a random 18-year-old who's starting an organization, right? And so it takes a bit of time, but eventually, these people will realize that, you are, that this is serious, right? It's not something that, I'm doing on a limb. And so, yeah, it was a combination of cold emails and really leveraging my network. And like you said, I can't emphasize enough, getting help is the biggest thing. I spent a lot of time doing it myself, and I had to learn that the hard way, that you really need a good team of people who can really help you out, that you can't do anything alone in this world. And the amazing thing about the stuttering community is I've never seen a more helpful community in my life, right? Like, I mean, with all the BLM like marches and stuff, like Black Lives Matter, I was talking with my African American friend who stutters. He was like, yeah, like that is the most inclusive environment I've ever seen in my life. Like nobody cares if you're an immigrant, if you're whatever ethnicity you're from, how old you are. Like I could be talking to someone who's 50 years older than I am, and we come from completely different backgrounds, and we connect on a level that is so personal. You can't get that anywhere, right? And so the stuttering community in general helped me out because people believed in me. Yeah. Sorry, I went on a little tangent there.
Does anyone have, if there aren't additional questions for Nathan, just other comments or takeaways from what you've heard tonight so far? This has been really awesome to hear.
I haven't had a chance to take a look at the website yet, but I was wondering if you have any stories out there from the people that you've been able to help so far, or
Yeah.
from their parents.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry. We finished asking the question. I wasn't sure
Yeah,
if you.
yeah.
Got it. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Of course. So just a clarifying point. We help both children and adults. It's not isolated to one. So, to give you an idea for the type of people that we help, these are people from severely low income communities. A lot of these people might not be able to afford to attend these NSA conferences or friends conferences, whatever it is. So one example that really kind of blew me away, and I know Katie's laughing because she has interacted with this person a lot too. She's an amazing 26-year-old immigrant from Bangladesh, right? And she's here in the US seeking asylum. And so back home in a Muslim-dominated country, Muslim-oriented country, she faced like death threats and rape threats because of her interest in STEM and interest in religious freedom. And so she came here to really pursue her dream in becoming a politician, healthcare activist. As you may imagine, for somebody with that dream, communication and the ability to speak coherently is really important, right? And so she felt like her stutter was holding her back, her severe stutter. And with our kind of acceptance-based speech therapy that we sponsor for someone with very little resources, it's been amazing to see how she's really been able to improve her confidence, get involved in local activist organizations, lead awareness campaigns, and really find her voice. And it's really the prototypical example where you have these people who have so much potential And once you kind of help them to provide that voice to the voiceless is our, our motto, you can really create a lot of change. And so, yeah, that's just one example of the type of people out there whose lives are being really hindered by the stuttering, right? And then there's another example in terms of the workshop side. I met a 16-year-old student with a stutter, and he also had autism, right? It was a milder form of autism, but his stuttering was really impacting him. He was getting help from his local speech therapist, and he really needed a lot of help to get through school, right? He was a senior in high school, and then we came in to give that workshop, like, hey, here's where you can get help with stuttering in college. Here's where you go. If you join the workforce, you can contact HR departments. And he came up to me. He was like, you totally, like saved my life. Like I was about to be a fish out of water next year. I was so worried about getting help. And, thank you so much for doing that. And that's, again, another example where spending an hour to give a workshop to help someone, have access to resources and totally change their life trajectory. I mean, those stories are the reason why, I kind of keep going with this organization, even though it can be challenging and hard to not get responses. So yeah, those are two examples of people whose again, life trajectory has been changed because of very different parts of the organization. Thanks for asking that. That's something I feel obviously very passionate about, and it's the whole reason why I started it.
So if no one else has any questions, I think we can start to wrap up. So Nathan, thanks again for joining us, and this has been so inspiring to hear, and it's so impressive to hear what you've done already, and the impact that you made, on so many people in the stuttering community. So I'm so impressed and feeling very inspired, and I think everyone else here is as well tonight. So thanks again for sharing this, and thanks for all you do with the stuttering community, and keep up the good work. I'm sure there'll be a lot more that we'll be hearing from you. So so keep up the great work with this. This is awesome to hear. So now I'll hand it over to Katie, if there's any closing comments.
Yes, and yeah, to echo what Zach said, thank you so much, Nathan. These are the kind of stories we need to hear right now. When the world is a crazy place, and it reminds us that there is so much future good out there that we can do, which is the whole inspiration behind this series that we're doing, and just so many great examples and in really concrete ways of creating that impact, which I think is especially exciting. So thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the support. This is community. We will be posting this, so for anyone who wasn't able to join, they'll be watching it at home. And then the next one coming up is in 2 weeks on November 1st, I think is the day, Sunday evening. And that will be featuring 3 of the folks who founded and ran the NYC Stutters conference series that ran for a couple of years. So we'll be speaking with Kaya Goldstein, Roisin McManus, and Christopher Schuyler, who are 3 of the organizers of that group. This was a special conference that was held exclusively for people who stutter, a one-day conference in New York City that was a little different than some of the previous stuttering conferences that had happened. So we'll learn from them of how they came up with this idea, what was it like to start that from scratch and build a community over successive years. So tune in for that one, and we've got a couple others queued up, as you might see some of the faces that are in the audience. You might see them again in a couple of weeks. You can check out our Eventbrite series to see what the other upcoming ones are. And I will be posting this online. You can go to Shared Voices Chicago on Facebook and you'll be able to find this stuff. Thank you again to everyone. This was awesome. Yeah, just can't say thanks enough. So I will end it here. Shout out to Adam for the awesome
Bye-bye.
gestures, and shout out to the Gordon family for the awesome pumpkin. And shout out to Nathan for all the amazing work he's doing for folks who stutter. So thanks everyone, and we will see you next time. Au revoir.